down the hammer and pick up the pencil. You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the Savvy Landlord as your host.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, bing, bing, boys and girls from around the world. I am so glad that you tuned into the Savvy Radio Show. Man, I'm super excited. I always say that because I really am. This is a weird personal goal. I've always wanted to have a relationship with an attorney. In my simple mind, I'm like, why would an attorney ever like me? Now, this was my mentality when I was 20 years ago, blue collar, and never thought outside the box. And then one day, not too long ago, maybe 6 months ago, I met this awesome attorney. Let me tell you this story. I was at a volleyball tournament at I think it was Tulsa or some far off land with my daughter, and I bump into this individual. Now, before this, my wife was like, hey, I met this awesome person. You need to meet Kendra. And I was like, no, wait, not Kendra. And so I was like, who's that? And one day she said, you'll meet her. So I met her, and we talked for almost 6 to 8 hours on that volleyball tournament about real estate and about acquisitions. And come to find out that this attorney, welcome to the show, Kendra Streeter. Hello.
Hello. Thank you.
Is a super amazing attorney. I can't remember how many, I'm going to say hundreds of millions of real estate transactions that she's done for a oil baron, Aubrey McClinton. That's just he's a celebrity. He's not with us anymore. But when you say that individual's name, there's a lot of acquisitions that have done several in my path of success of real estate. And she was this humble little attorney. And when you hang out with this gal for a short amount of time, you don't realize that she's the perfect balance of success and gangsterness, because she's real sweet and nice when you talk to her. But then when it gets down to business, I think she's the attorney that you want to have in your court. And that's exactly what happened. I was working on a transaction. Actually, she saved me with a crumbling business acquisition. And she saved me I already hired 2 other attorneys, and I wasn't getting the feedback, or it just felt awkward with these 2 other gentlemen. And then I hired Kendra, and she handled the whole thing from start to finish, which changed my life. So then I've hired her again on this Family Dollar acquisition, and then I've hired her several times. And I was like, over this 6 months, almost to a year, we've built a relationship together. And I asked her to be on the radio show for multiple reasons. One, a lot of people need to know about you, Kendra. I think that you have a unique skill set, not only as a female attorney, which seems to be in this real estate game, more men than women. And I think it's time for that to change. 2, you have an amazing skill set that I never knew until I hired you. And 3, you're a really cool person. So that's a super long, crazy introduction.
Thank you. I appreciate all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So why did you become an attorney? Like, how'd that happen?
Well, honestly, I thought I wanted to be an FBI agent, and I grew up thinking that's what I wanted to do. So back then, I knew you had to either be an attorney or an accountant, and I thought attorney would work. Then 9/11 happened during law school, and their shift kind of changed on what they wanted in the FBI. So I remember graduating and thinking, oh no, now I have to be an attorney. And started at a firm 18 years ago. They did oil and gas, mergers, acquisitions, and had some big clients that had some side gigs, real estate. And so I just fell into it and was blessed with great clients, great mentors, great attorneys to work for, and learned really quickly that real estate was pretty cool, that it was a pretty safe, even job, but there was a lot to learn and a lot to do. And as I tell people, it's a limited commodity. So it's there's only so much out there. So it's always going to have value. People are always going to need it, want it, buy and sell it. So it was pretty secure in that way as well. So that's kind of how I ended up here 18 years later.
So you started out as a oil attorney, or the firm that you went through
firm
first?
That I went to primarily did oil and gas and mergers, acquisitions for oil and gas companies. And at that time, one of their big clients was going to start some personal real estate. And I remember at the time I got interviewed, my boss said, "What real estate classes did you take in law school?" And I started laughing and I said, "None." And I thought then and there that job wasn't going to be mine. And a couple hours later, there you go. He said, "Yeah, we'd like to hire you." So I've learned a lot through those people and through having clients like Mr. McClendon that, I mean, he was just a sharp, very intelligent human, and details were important. And so when time was a limited commodity to him, so you learn to drill down on the details quickly and efficiently. And which I think is the big thing I've learned, that efficiency, not everyone's efficient in this world. And I love attorneys. I've got great friends that are, but it's not always what attorneys are known for is their efficiency. And I think that's been a big key, having learned under those guys and having those clients, that I didn't have a choice but to be efficient, because the work was coming so fast and furious and they needed the right details at the right time. So I think that's been a big help in my career, is that, as you know, when I get a deal, I just want to do it as fast and as well as I can for a client. You don't need to spend money on me that doesn't need to be spent. So
I think that's what makes you so special, is because, you said a lot of attorneys struggle with efficiency. I think it's because they want to bill more. No offense, no disrespect for attorneys. I mean, their time is valuable and they're charging for their time. And I think they just take their time. I don't say to pad their pockets, but I mean, that's how they make money. What's the goal? To be fast, right? If you're going to make more money. But I just think that you don't have a scarcity mentality. The more that you produce, or the more production that you can return back, the greater relationship, the more clients. I mean, I'm assuming that's what you're thinking.
Yes, absolutely. I think when you make clients happy and you have good results and they deem that you did exactly what they needed you to do in an efficient manner, they come back, and they come back over and over again. And
yeah, that's why I hired you multiple times. So like real quick, because even though it's a cost issue, I think most people, but they don't really value what that cost produces, right? Have another person on my team. And that's what set me from being this uneducated individual doing a ton of deals on my own, when you really brought into light on this last acquisition, or the one that this is your experience. It was just natural for you. And then like, I remember the point where I was like dealing with this title company and they were so mean to me. And you're like, and I was busy at that time. I can't remember. I was in the middle of something, and this lady was lunchtime and she was blowing me up this closing, and you're like, "I'll handle it." And you punked her basically. And either we're going to close the deal or we're not. And this is why, and this is legally why, and you should honor your side, ma'am. And boom, it closed. I couldn't believe it. And I was so thankful because this chick was going to ruin my day. She was upset because I didn't do something, and that I had to sign these, acknowledge all these. What was that? I can't remember what the thing was. I had to acknowledge all this stuff. And you're like, "No, don't agree to any of that stuff. That's not your responsibility. You're passing it on." Right. Again, if I did not know you, I would have just signed that little document. And basically what this document stated is that I am responsible. Anything that happens to this property almost before and now, when they're taking possession, I'm responsible. And you're like, "No, don't agree to that. Don't accept those terms. That's just a title company protecting that individual and not protecting your interest." And that's what an attorney does, is supposed to protect your interest. Is that what's your mindset when you're looking? I know you have this passion for purchase agreements, and we're going to get to those, but what's that mindset like? That you're going into a concern, or someone calls you, how does your mind work from there? That you get the problem? Tell me.
It's like any service, right? You call someone, and my job is to make your life easier, to make it go smoothly, to let you hire me, you hand it off. A lot of clients, they like you do a lot of other things. And so you go do that meeting. I'll make sure this closes and gets handled. If I need you, I'll let you know. But that's my goal, is to make it as seamless as possible and to protect your interest. I mean, you're my client, right? If something goes wrong now or in 5 years on that deal, you're going to always come back to me and say, why didn't you cover me on this? So my goal is to always look at it from now and what it could possibly be in the future. And like I said, I just want you to be able to hand it off. I don't want you to have to keep coming back. You're paying me. As an old boss used to say, it's a brain damage factor, right? You don't want to have to go through the brain damage. People do get ugly. They do get sideways. And it's not personal to me. Sometimes I think that's a lot of things too in the business world. When people invest their personal money into projects, it gets personal real quick. And so seeing, you can't see the trees for the forest when you're in that position. So you hire someone like me that it's not personal. It's personal in that a lot of times these clients become my friends, and I don't want anyone to mess them around or pull one over on them. But at the same time, I can keep a calm head. And I've done this so many times that I know where people are going with it. And so I can be helpful and I can be calm, and it's not personal. Because once it gets personal, and I've seen so many deals get that way, it is best that both parties step out and somebody in the middle, usually attorneys, are the calm, reasonable forces that talk. I mean, I have one going on right now. Thank God there's a good attorney on the other side, because it's a family deal and everybody is mad. And no one has any idea what the legal issues are at this point, because they're so personally upset by the situation. So, and it's real estate. So I think that's kind of what I try to do, is I want to make your life easier. I want to look out for you and just give you the best advice and, work off my experience that I've had. I mean, I've been blessed with the work and the clients, and I want to kind of pay it forward to everyone else, that here's what I can offer you. And the other thing, I told a person called yesterday, and I said, it's not my expertise. They called about a very specific issue. And I think honesty, and I said, I am happy to get up to speed for you on that issue, but it's not my expertise. Some people claim to know more than they know, and that doesn't always work out well.
Or they don't want to turn anyone down because it makes them look weak or whatever. I get it.
Yes. And I'm the first to say, I know what I know. And
that's how I roll. I'd rather sleep at night and not act like I know everything. And then he's always going to bite you in the butt in the back end. So let's talk about purchase agreements. I know that you have a lot of experience in purchase agreements. What tips, or what do you look for? Because I know I randomly sent you a contract that I purchased that property in Louisiana, and you're like, this is okay, but these are the 5 things that you've missed here. So is it better to call an attorney? Because I know, I just got into the commercial game heavily about 3 years ago. And I remember I was closing, and they're like, who's your attorney? I'm like, do I need an attorney to close? And then just last deal I sent you, you're like, why did you not call me beforehand? And I'm like, I don't know why. So let's go into the process because attorneys are known to be more advantageous in commercial acquisitions. Walk us through the process of how this should go down properly, because I continue to go backwards.
Well, I think the big issue is what over the years, I tell people, you will save money if you hire someone in the beginning of the process to make sure that the purchase agreement sets you up right for the entire project. Because if you hire me when things go wrong, I can only work off what's in that document. And unfortunately, not to speak ill of anyone else, but a lot of times some of those issues are missed. And when you go back to the document to try to see how we can resolve it, it's not in there. And then it's left to argument, debate, and sadly, sometimes people end up in litigation, and that's not cost effective or time effective for anyone. So I think the attention to detail in the purchase agreement is key. Like I tell everyone, there's 2 sides. I always ask, are you buying or selling? Because those documents are 2 very different documents in my world. The key is allowing yourself as a buyer to have all the rights to do all the due diligence that you can possibly do in a reasonable timeline. People bind themselves with 7 days, 10 days. I see it all the time. And by the time they get it to me, I say, well, those timelines expired. You're kind of stuck, which is not anything anyone wants to hear, nor do I want to tell anyone that. And the language, I've had two lately. One, if someone had just asked me one sentence, it would have saved this individual, and it was a realtor, $8,000. It was just worded so it wasn't worded correctly, and so it lost her $8,000, which, like I told her, I hated to tell you that, but if you had called and taken 30 minutes of my time, I would have written that sentence for you and we wouldn't be here. So I think the key is it's going to cost you less in the beginning. If you get it all right and you do due diligence right and get the right due diligence from the right people, you won't have the problems at closing, right before closing, post closing, when these things come up that you weren't aware of. And it's just a lack of, often people don't know what they need to do because they've never done it before. That's it. That's all it is. So educating people on what that process is helpful.
So tell me about like what clauses that you like, or what clauses have you seen that have been detrimental? Like,
well, I'll tell you one. Interesting. Like recently, someone on a property decided to put a different easement on, add a new one in the middle right before closing in favor of a neighbor. And the contract I was working in was more of a form agreement. I didn't do it. Again, I tell people when I get thrown in the third quarter, I can only work from the third quarter on. I don't know what happened the first half. So, but I was looking at that document, and typically I would put like a standstill where, seller, you are selling me this. It has to be in the same shape with the same encumbrances and service agreements and leases and easements that were there the day I signed it up. You can't 10 days before closing add an access easement for your neighbor and think that's okay. But that agreement didn't really specify it. So now instead of just pointing to one provision that said, you've got a problem, we've got lots of attorneys and threats of litigation and case law and research on. So it's so I would say standstills are good. Like I said, you're right to do all the due diligence you want to do. In commercial deals, you want to make sure your title's clean. You want to make sure the property itself has had all the inspections you want. Environmental, which sometimes take longer. You want to make sure you have your survey. You want to make sure that before you are set in this contract, you've acquired all your due diligence and had the ability to review it and often discuss it with your lender. Lenders want certain items, and if you don't have them, then they're not going to end up giving you the money in the end. So it's nice to be able to make sure, like you said, you have the time to bounce it off of everybody and make revisions. So I would say the due diligence provisions, the standstills.
Yeah, what's a standstill?
Just that on the day I sign this contract, I'm not going to add anything to this property. I'm not going to add a new tenant. I'm not going to add a new service agreement.
Because you're responsible. Right. Okay.
Yes. So I know what I'm buying, because you don't want to show up to closing and the title company says, oh, we did a gap check on your title and these two leases popped up and now they're an access easement across the front of your land and you can't put anything there. Well, that's a problem. But yet, sure, technically, I'd be locked in that contract. So it's things like that.
What are clauses that you have that work really well to get out of a contract? Because that's my biggest fear is like, is there a financial contingency that you really like that you put in there? But sometimes if I was selling a property and you don't have the money, I don't want to sell the property. I don't want it to be under contract with you anyway. But is there any kind of unique, creative ways to get out of a contract, and what language would that be? Some kind of tip there?
I mean, like I said, my buyer and seller contracts are two different versions of each other. But as a buyer, I think your due diligence is key. And if you're a developer, so for instance, if I were just to buy a piece of property, existing piece of property, has a building, I'm going to make sure that all of my timelines run off receipt of the title work, the last step, the title work, the survey, the phase one, leases, copies of any financials that I've asked for from the seller. And so that I have sufficient time and I can get out for any or no reason whatsoever during that due diligence period. So I've got everything, I'm reviewing it. I've got 30 days to look at it. And in the middle of that, the world crashes. And I say, oh, maybe I don't really want this. But it's for any reason or no reason whatsoever is what you want in there if you're the buyer. And financing contingencies, yes, to make them as close to your closing, that timeline as you possibly can. So that, again, interest rates went up 3 points from start to when you could lock it in and you went, oh God, this doesn't make sense anymore. You want that financing contingency to go to that. So, and as a seller, yeah, you want them locked down. I used to have a CFO for Opera used to always tell me these are option agreements. Like, I don't even know if they're going to buy them or not. And it used to drive him crazy. He was a venture capital guy. And I said, you're right. And that's your job as a seller, to lock it down as quickly as possible, to make their earnest money go hard. And if they want to buy more time, that's fine. But then that additional money goes hard. So it's an incentive that, oh my God, I've already got 30, 40,000 in this deal. Might as well close it.
That's how I roll from now on.
Yeah. You want
all money has to go hard. I don't know. Even in residential, because I've been in commercial for so long now. In residential, I just make it go hard now. Like, people just tie up property. I mean, it's the climate's different now, but people would years ago just tie up property with $500 and just sit on it for 40 days and then not walk away. And then you, as a seller, you miss that opportunity to close that acquisition. Now I'm like, if you're really going to buy it, you're really going to lose money if you don't close it. And that's just, and a lot of residential realtors don't like me for that. And I'm like, what's the point? Why are you trying to buy it? You should know within the due diligence period that it's not, it needs a roof, yes or no. You should find that out in 7 to 10 days. It shouldn't be. And if, but 30 days after, because you have a credit score of 300 and you can't close a deal, you just wasted everyone's time. That's why I'm like, if you're going to do that, I want to acquire the cost that it would take for me to do that, which would be $1,000 a month rent or whatever the rent would cost that month.
Right.
But I noticed
the thing about drafting purchase agreements versus, and again, the form agreements are great. They're great for lots of different deals. They work perfectly. But if you want, you can tailor it. I mean, that's the nice thing about an attorney. You can tailor exactly what your needs are. You have 7 days, you have 8 days, whatever the days are, we lock it in there. And it's just the certainty, I think, factor that attorneys kind of give you, because I can walk you through exactly what every provision in there means because I wrote it. And that's helpful. I think a lot of times people don't understand what they sign. I think a lot of times the agents helping don't quite understand. And don't get me wrong, there are amazing realtors and brokers and attorneys out there on all sides. But I do think having an attorney, I mean, if you're trying to look for what the positive is on hiring an attorney in a real estate deal, it's that we know exactly what every word in that agreement means and what the consequences are and the repercussions and how to tweak it to make it fit your particular deal. So.
All right. Another question is I read a book called Winning Through Intimidation by a guy named Robert Ringer, and he was getting beat around. Losing his commission. He was a guy that was brokering a bunch of apartment deals in the 80s. And he figured out if you just lawyer up on every transaction, things would go smoother. What's it like communicating with another attorney in acquisitions? Do you feel that you got another attorney on the other side? Does it usually go smoother with two attorneys, or the on the street, it's like they're just there to make money to make the deal go south? I mean, when two attorneys get into it in a negotiating battle, it doesn't close or cost more money. What's your take on that? And is there a code for attorneys? Like there's a good old boy club, and especially your female. I know this is a big one. How does all that mesh together?
Well, I think I've always tell people, if there's a good attorney on the other side that's reasonable and gets it, it makes the deal go 100 times better. because we both know your client wants to sell, mine wants to buy. How do we make that happen? Because if we blow it up, they're going to be mad at us. Mm-hmm. So if there's a way to make it work that makes everyone happy, it's good to have a good attorney. I have one on the other side that popped in this family deal, and he and I spoke several times, and he's going to make this a lot easier. So I think it's helpful. Yeah, there's definitely a good old boys club. I bought a lot of ranches in small counties in Oklahoma, and I've been asked if I was the assistant or the secretary or just delivering documents at various closings by a certain demographic of older men. And I always smile and say, no, sir. No, I'm it. I'm the attorney. I'm what you get to deal with. So I think the one thing that has served me well in life is I was raised that if you're dealing with the janitor or the CEO, you treat them the absolute same. And so I kind of look at everybody that way. Like they're just another person that hopefully we're going to try to work together to get this deal done. And so there's no intimidation factor on any level. You should never be intimidated by anyone on anything. I just was raised that way. No one is better than anyone else. And so
that's your philosophy, and that's all goody gumdrop. But I've just noticed just on that title company that tried to punk me, because I knew that title company from that seller were in cahoots and they were trying to intimidate me. But then when I lawyered up, it just went well. My question is, how often does that happen? I mean, I know that, pie in the sky, we're all great people, but I mean, is there tyrant attorneys out there, and how do you,
there's absolutely tyrant attorneys out there. And, I deal with people to the level that I'm dealt with. So okay, if you want to be civil and get along, let's do this. If you want to go all out and we're going to see who can be the biggest jerk, then I will do it on a most professional level that I can possibly do it. And yes, you deal with those all the time. And I usually chuckle and I'll kind of type a really tacky email and then I'll let it sit for a little while and I'll realize, nope, I'm not going to do that. But there's a nice way to tell people to go to hell. I don't know if I can say that on this, but I actually have a saying somewhere saved that when I do kind of finally flip on someone that I've had enough of their bullying and whatnot, there's a way to tell people to go to hell where they're happy to go. And I think that's an art you have to learn, because it's a level of professional, but very firm and in your eyes and very tactful. And, it's like, okay, if that's, I see where you're coming from. Great. I think you're wrong. And here's why I think you're wrong. And we're not doing that. It's just not how it's going to go down, because I think if you come from a level of, you have experience in it and expertise and you're confident in your position. Like when you called in the title company, I've dealt with 1,000 title companies, and yes, they all want their documents signed. And, I've had that conversation 100 times. So it's like, here we go. And it was just a matter of, hey, I understand why you want them. You don't need them. And it's going to possibly hurt my client. So we're not going to do it.
Yeah,
and if
I love that.
Problem, I think you just hit it head on. Always hit people head on. I'm very direct.
Yeah, I really, most people in this game of real estate are uneducated. Like there's no school. I mean, there's some schooling, but I would have signed those documents if I didn't know you. And I thought they were just standard documents, and each state is different. Each title company is different. And I was like, when you explained it to me, you're like, those documents are not advantageous for you at all. You are taking all this responsibility. And I thought that was really cool. And I think that's why it's important to hire an attorney to just defunk or disify, whatever.
Justify the process. Yes.
Yes. And then my other question related to that when you were talking was, how do you stay non-emotional? It's just, how do you do that as an attorney? Because it is an emotional business. This real estate game is extremely emotional, highs, lows, financial gains, financial loses. How do you not get caught up into the emotions?
I think sometimes you do to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, you've hired me to be the one that sees the big picture that keeps their eyes on the prize, no matter what the emotional, no matter how tacky the other side is, no matter how many jabs you got. You've hired me to do my job. And so I think all kinds of things. I tell people that all the time. I feel and think all kinds of things. I had an elderly lady feel like she was getting completely taken advantage of on a deal. And just recently, and she probably emailed me 6 times a day and called me twice a day for 2 weeks. And instead of losing my mind, I thought this is what my mom would do. If she felt like someone was doing this to her, she would be on me like white on rice. And so, I just would I always try to put myself in their shoes. Like, okay, I get it. That'd be my mom. And her daughter was calling and saying, I'm sorry. I said, no, I get it. I will deal with her like I would my mom. Like, hey, I'm hearing you. I feel you. I'm sorry this is going down. I promise I will do everything in my power to fix it for you. But I have to have time to do that. So please don't call 2 or 3 times a day. But I think you just have to know that that's what I'm hired for. And I can feel it. And, it is. I hate some of these deals. More so, over the years, I hate seeing what has happened to the other side with people that weren't given maybe what I deemed to be the correct advice. Or someone just wasn't paying attention. And I'm there to just protect my client. And so I am limited on what things I can kind of give the other side. And I've wanted to step in and say, this is not going to end up well for you. You're not looking at the right issues. And so that is hard. And it's not me hiding the ball. I would never hide the ball or be dishonest. I don't mean that at all, but just due diligence items that I don't have to lay on a silver platter to the other side in commercial deals for sure, that they've missed or an attorney has missed, and it's going to cause them a lot of grief down the road. So I think you just focus on what your job is.
Yeah, it's awesome. I would love to know more about crazy deals that have gone down that have blown up. Not the transaction, but just, I get nervous, like EPA stuff. I'm stuck with a property and I can't, or I'm the sucker. The greater fool theory in real estate is really prevalent, and people are aware of that you could be stuck with an egg. And I'm assuming you've seen this go down multiple times where, I don't know, there's 100 of those stories. We can probably spend days on those. Give us one story that sticks out to you that's like, this could have been better if they would have done this. Or do you have a story that comes to your mind?
Well, I've had a couple that clients haven't wanted to do, like you said, EPA. So that brings this to light. Haven't wanted to do environmental phase 1 environmental assessments, kind of your first step, usually on a due diligence side. And for whatever reason, I think where they were located, one was on an old highway, and one was on a corner. If you have a corner property, even if it's rural and it seems to be just ag land, I've had this one twice. I said, let's just do it. Well, it was an old gas station, and the tanks were still there. They weren't required to pull them until, I can't recall when that came to be, and it was leaking. And so, it was a $1,500 phase 1 had they not done it. And then at the time asked the seller, you're going to have us help us dig around and get to some clean dirt and pull these and all the things you have to do to make sure that every environmental agency is happy when those things come to light. Wouldn't have happened. And so I don't know. I've told clients to do them and they haven't. And so I do wonder how many have come across buried tanks and things when they go to develop. I just think it's worth doing your due diligence, and it's like anything. It's going to ask for permission, not forgiveness. Forgiveness usually costs you a lot more. I've had clients that was their motto. They weren't asking for permission. And so I have dealt with lots of different agencies, and it costs you more for me to have to try to back out of it in the end than to get it right in the beginning.
Yeah, at your firm where you're at, I was in the middle of a phase. Well, we went to phase 3 like a dummy. A lot of my friends were like, it's very rare to go to a phase 3. And I was like, propensity for disaster. And I got to a phase 3. We did a phase 2 test where we like drilled all these things and all over the property, 50 something little drill. And then I talked to Mr. Greiger there, and he's like, I wouldn't buy the property. He's like, if it leaks into someone else's property, you're 100% responsible, regardless that the guy before you. It is there. It's very clear. And he was telling me some other story. And I walked on that deal, but I was curious. I followed up with that deal later. So I went through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and I walked after $20,000 of due diligence. Mm-hmm. And the guy behind me just paid cash and didn't do anything. And the thing is, where this was leaching, it was an old 19 something dry cleaner, which is new rule. You should never buy a dry cleaner, an old dry cleaner. I've heard this 100 times from 100 attorneys. But I could change the world. But the thing that really scared me was that it was leaching. It could be leaching because we can only do all these testing up to our property. So we knew, like, this engineer that we hired, this environmental individual, tested it and predicted the flow of this drainage, and we couldn't determine across the street if it was really touching their property. But where it came down to was, like, that individual over there is an attorney. So it would be really dumb to buy this property, and that guy would be no big deal, and he would probably win if you didn't rectify the situation, and which is hundreds of thousands of dollars later. But anyway, it was interesting, and that's how I knew what your firm is. That's how I originally knew about your firm, and it's this first circle to go all the way around and meeting you at a volleyball game. And I've hired you at least 4 times, which every time it's been awesome. So, and that's why I was like, man, I'm going to do a podcast.
Thank you. Yes, I am blessed to work with some great guys. I mean, Sean Rieger is amazing. He does a lot of the zoning, rezoning, those type of deals that I don't necessarily do, which is another way. I should have mentioned that during due diligence. If you want to make sure you've got your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and you want to rezone, you put in a due diligence period, and then you add another rezoning license permitting period. And I've learned a lot about that since I've been with him. And it is its own beast in its own right. But it's good to have a firm that has a little variety too. If there's an issue that I don't know about, because it's kind of litigation driven, the guy in the office next to me can probably help me. So that's been a benefit over the
That's awesome.
time.
All right, let's wrap this up. So I've referred one of my friends to you, and he was buying, I don't want to say his name because I didn't get his approval. I know he would say yes, but just keep it kosher. So he's buying a 16-unit apartment building. Does this ring a bell? In a small town? Mm-hmm. Does that ring a bell? And he said, I was like, hey, did you hire Kendra? Oh my God, I hired that girl. And he's like, on the purchase agreement that she did for us, which he was so happy that he hired you before signing the contract. Do you remember there was one thing that you figured out? Does that ring a bell? Because if it doesn't, I'd have to ask him, and then I'll bring it back. You caught something on the agreement. The property sat for so many years, and do you have any idea what I'm talking about?
Well, I think it was the age of the apartment was part of it, and it was the phase 1. I had said, it was before 78, and so there's lots of things that can be in a building before 78, and that it did sit. And so you really needed to hone in on the environmental and structural and all of those things after a building sits that long. And he did get out of it, and he has been very, he has referred me a lot of clients since then. So
cool.
I'm appreciative of him.
Well, he was excited that, you caught something, and I can't remember. I need to ask him.
But I also told him, you want to advise people. Like I said, if I don't know it, I will tell you what I think you should do to find it out. But I told him, I remember saying, you've got to get your contractor in there during your due diligence period to tell you what he thinks it's going to cost, because I have a feeling you have a number in your head, but I can tell you it's probably going to be a lot more than that. And I think that was part of it. When he got his contractor in there during due diligence, when he could walk, the number to get it to where he thought it was going to be was astounding. And so he said, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So you just, again, I don't walk you through. I mean, I tell people, and that's the other thing I want to say is I can be as involved or uninvolved as you want me to be. I have clients that very savvy, but they'll call and bounce off one issue and then you won't hear from them for 2 weeks, but then you'll do a whole lease, big commercial 50-page lease with them, but then they'll run interference with the other side. I mean, like I said, I can be as involved or uninvolved. And so people kind of get scared. I think that they think attorneys equal a lot of money.
No.
But I will counsel you on what you should do. If you don't want me to do it, I will give you some guidance and tell you, here's what I would do. Just make sure you ask the right questions. So,
yeah, I think that the point that attorneys cost a lot of money, I think that's just ignorance. And I used to think that way and I could never afford it. And I just think it's just a cost of doing business. You just, what is, a pencil for a piece of paper, you need to have a pencil. You couldn't get, you couldn't write it down. And I think that's what an attorney is. And for next level real estate, if you want to go to the next level in real estate, you're going to have to hire attorneys, period. And I think you should hire them all the time. And people I don't know. It's been a value for me, but I used to think that way. I used to think that it's expensive. And I think hiring the right person is where people need to go right instead of wrong. They hire the wrong attorney that's not specialized in real estate and they think that that's okay. And that's not. And the great thing about you that I enjoy is that you're a real estate investor yourself and that you buy property when you can, and that you understand the nuances of the whole process from start to finish. And it's not just that you're in the ivory tower charging X amount of money just to give you advice. No, you're a human being that wants people to succeed. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you've been through all those channels. And that's why I think it's important that you hire the people that you can get along with and that have the same kind of mindset and that understand the whole business from start to finish. And that's you.
Yes. Yeah. It's like I tell people, if you're going to go to the doctor and your head hurts, you're not going to go to your back doctor, right?
Right.
You're not going to go to a podiatrist if your head hurts. So attorneys we do all kinds of things. If someone calls me with a criminal or family or a variety, I have friends that I'd be happy to send you to, but I'm not going to be helpful or efficient or good for you on that issue. So, owning your own real estate and realizing, like I tell people, I know those costs are a lot. I know doing due diligence and phase ones and all that seems like a lot of money in the beginning, but you catch one bad deal, like you were saying about all the monitoring wells and things, I'm sure that were on that property and the potential leakage that could have cost you more than the property was ever going to be worth had you not caught it in the beginning. So it was worth the $1,500 or whatever. Because like I said, I personally understand why people are like, I don't want to do that.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Well, the side note on that, when we figured all this out, and I even had the city kind of be willing to pay for it, but where the deal that broke the camel for me was that the city or the government, EPA, would have to monitor that well, this thing, which every quarter would have to be $300 for someone to come over there and test it. And I was like, that's $1,200 a year. That's $100 a month, but that's okay. But then I'm at the city's mercy, and these laws could change at any moment. And I've noticed the EPA has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And if they said you can't have this venting stack anymore, you're going to have to excavate it, that could be $50,000. And so that was the bigger risk. It wasn't that what we had to test it every quarter. It was pollution, but it was the law could change. And then I would have to lawyer up again. And you're dealing with the city, they have a lot more control than you do. And that's the law of success of real estate. Who's in control? If I continue to buy this property because I'm emotionally attached to a 34 square foot, huge retail space because I think it's cool. No, I'm actually relinquishing my control to the city to tell me I can't operate there because of the vapors of this chemical spill from 1920. I just learned a lot through that process. And I think through hiring attorneys just makes a sound, better decision and then I'll have no headaches in the future.
And often we dealt with the city, municipality, or state, whatever the agency is, before on probably a similar issue. And so you at least know who to talk to get the real answer, as I tell people. I told someone that yesterday. It was the federal funding with the CARES Act deal. And I said, the key here is we got to find the right person in that agency that has the knowledge and the authority. And once we find that person, this will be smooth sailing. But it's got to find that person. And it's the same, I feel like, in any agency. If you can get someone that you deal with on a regular basis that can make the calls and help you out, that's the way to do it. That's why you always treat people with kindness. I'm not usually, people that know me are probably laughing at that. I have a lot of sarcasm in my world. But at the end of the day, if I call title companies I've worked with and closers I've worked with, I know them. And I am going to ask about their family. And you just have to be a decent human. And I feel like a lot of attorneys lack in that. They can't take 5 minutes to ask how the closer's son is doing because he had surgery last week. Like, it's those small things in life that and it helps. It makes your life better. Quite frankly, it brings more to your world. So, I think real estate's a lot of relationships. If I've learned anything in especially the last couple of years, it's a small world. And the same people show up on same brokers, same realtors kind of pop back up. And so treat everybody fair and decent. And
it's a small world, because I was buying some land in Norman just recently, and your name came up in this conversation because I was, just talking about, I don't know. And they're like, yes, we've dealt with her on an acquisition with Aubrey. We were buying property from Aubrey and you represented them. And she said that you were amazing. And here's the cool thing. He was an attorney. So he's an attorney investor that has a group of investors that I'm in, and he was representing at that time. And that we're buying a whole, several hundred acres in Norman. But it was interesting that he knew you. And it's like, because in this small little world of real estate, there's not too many prominent or people that are committed to real estate. There's their general practice. They understand it and they can do a transaction, but to really, have that reputation, I think that's kudos to you. I was impressed. I felt like I was a part of some weird team. Yeah, I know her.
Well, I appreciate that.
I could know her. It's only X amount of money an hour. I was just playing. I was like, this is my free hour right here. I was like, what question could I ask? No. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a unique call. I'm excited that we got to meet Kendra Streeter. If you want to get to know her, if you have business in the real estate arena in Oklahoma or outside the country, I know you deal with a lot of people all over the country that are doing acquisitions here in Oklahoma from California, because I've overheard you say, yeah, I just dealt with a guy from California. But if you hear this and you are doing any kind of transaction in real estate or just wisdom, she's a consultant as well, email her. And what is your email that you want me to give out?
Okay. My work email, I'm at Rieger Law Group, but my email, it's letter K, Streeter, Streeter, at Rieger Law Group. And it's RIEGER lawgroup.com.
Okay.
So, and we're out in Norman, Oklahoma. But like you said, yeah, absolutely. People see Oklahoma as a good place to invest because our real estate is cheap compared to California, anywhere else. So I deal with a lot of people out of state, and they're baffled. And they're also baffled by the process. We do a abstracting deal that most of this country does not do. And it is anymore. Both mind-numbing. And I dealt with it. I have a client out of Alabama that called me and he said, what in the world is going on? I said, well, let me explain something to you, how we do things here. And there's nothing you can do about it except
pay $500 for, but it's weird too. I'm closing a deal for a friend in Missouri, a deed of trust. It's a totally different document and process, and it should be, I'm loaning somebody money and they're in Missouri and the title company is like 7 days out. Deed of trust, every state is different. Almost every cities are different, right? People, the way they record stuff, and I don't know.
It is different. And Oklahoma is just one of two, I think. I think there's still one out there that does this abstracting system. And it just makes it a whole different ballgame. So, people say close an escrow. I always hear that and I laugh. I think that's like maybe California, a lot of other states kind of have that concept. And so you'll have attorneys from other states that jump in these deals. And I actually had one last week with another individual I work with, and he said they want to basically make us buy this before we even sign the purchase agreement. And I said, where are they from? And he said, California. Yeah, there you go. I said, just please explain to them it's just a different world here. It is, and we don't do things that way. So I'm sorry. If I was buying out there, we would do it that way. But I think it's a lot of that too. Just having to make sure everybody's really aware of how things go in the state. Like it or not, it is what it is. So
that's it. That's awesome. All right. What's your email one more time? K Streeter, STREETER at RigerLaw
Group.com.
Okay. And it's RIEGER Law Group. All right.
All right. Perfect.
Thanks for listening to the Savvy Radio Show. Glide online and listen to our other motivating episodes at savvyradioshow.com. Connect on Twitter at LandlordBook and always be buying assets.